Assalamu alaikum. I think after a long session, probably you feel it's high time to end and have your dinner. But unfortunately, the organizers have decided keep this topic somehow a complex topic in this time. But even though it's complex, you can actually understand and through your life experiences, through your experience in Islamic movements, especially probably in last sessions, you understood what is the dark reality that exists in our country. What is the real conceptual, theoretical reasons for that? If we want to clearly understand where the idea of our oppression or idea of our current situation, current plight is coming from, we have to actually thoroughly understand the notions of secularism, nationalism, and the nation state. These are the three concepts which are not only a mere concept but is a kind of a mobilizing point for modern political and social cultural realms. These three concepts, secularism, nationalism, and nation state, is actually a kind of a modern trinity. You can say it's a modern trinity that mobilize entire population politically, culturally, socially. It's not merely a concept, some kind of a theoretical or some kind of a conceptual, sociological concepts. Rather than in the modern era, these concepts actually ruling us, deciding our thinking pattern, deciding our polity, deciding our educational system, even deciding our sensibilities. So in that level, secularism, nationalism, and nation state have a crucial role, how we engage with that and how we critically engage with these concepts. If we have a kind of a different kind of idea of polity, society, culture, civilization, etc., etc. Because all these concepts originated not kind of out of a vacuum. It's originated with a kind of historical baggage. Secularism, nationalism, or nation state, now we understood as a kind of a norm, a kind of a normal kind of thing. Now we think that everybody, we in the sense that larger common people, mass, think that we have already historically, civilizationally secular. Our idea of religion was always already private. Religion, the idea of religion confined into the ritual or symbols, some kind of doctrinal principles. No, all these concepts coming from a specific historical background. Obviously, you see this man, probably somebody will know this man. His son is more popular now than father now. Son is Zohran Mamdani. This is Mahmoud Mamdani, his father, a political anthropologist working in Colombia. So he actually wrote an interesting work called Neither Settler Nor Colonial. In this work, he actually tracing back from where this idea of nationalism emerged. He tracing back that history into the 1492. What is the importance of 1492? As part of Islamic movements, you probably every time Spain, the fall of Granada, or the end of Muslim Islamicate autonomy all over the world. That's why, after that only this idea of nationalism, the rule by majority, the rule by cultural majority, or construction of a kind of a majority and minority is initiated, started in our polity. Before that, no, there was that not that kind of idea. So Mamdani argues that the nation state was part of colonialism. Permanent minorities are not natural. They were invented by the power. Power in the sense that in that time, for Crusaders, they want to make Spain as a kind of Christian majority state. So entire history, you all know how this Inconquista, reconversion, all these things happened. And now the idea of nation state emerged there. Nation emerged there. Nation means a cultural majority, idea of cultural majority. Cultural majority has to rule the polity. That idea emerged there. So naturally, if a cultural majority has to be constructed, naturally a cultural minority has to also be constructed. So these are all now both the constitutive elements. The power create a kind of cultural majority for the sake of nationalism. Then they have to maintain their majority status. There should be a minority. So what I am saying that now we think that these are all concepts just like created out of vacuum, some intellectuals or some theoretician thing, and they developed this kind of idea. No, it was clear-cut idea about how polity has to go. It have a kind of some civilizational imprint, some theological imprints also, and larger crucial point is that it has to erase the then existing, in 1492, then existing Islamicate world order, Islamicate civilizational polity that recognize differences mutually. But for example, if you instill, when we discussing about Palestine, etc., we will hear that now Spain, in across the Europe, Jews were persecuted, but in Spain they were safe. No, they were allowed to stay with dignity there. That was the imagination of Islamicate civility, Islamicate polity, Islamicate civilization. But after that, the idea of this nation state emerged with the idea of modernism, modernity. What is this idea of modernity? Obviously, you may be thinking about largely this rationality, individuality, etc., positivism, scientific number, etc. We will hear in this classrooms, school classrooms. Our textbook show us that. But no, empiricism, positivism, all that also existed before also. Ibn Rushd, who was Ibn Rushd? Or who was the Ibn Sina? Who invented major algebraic theorems? That all now happened in Islamicate world, in some extent Chinese civilization, etc. But what Europe has done, all this knowledge, they converted into their civilizational prism for their dominance. Knowledge, for example, in the Islamicate civilization, knowledge or understanding of the world as Quran mentioned, ayat of the Allah, the world described as the ayat of Allah, all this universe, camel or earth, all the ayat of Allah. Though a believer or a man or a Muslim has to understand these ayats properly, to invoke his fitra. So that's why Muslim scholars always in the history, they studied, they understand, they observed different phenomena of the world, but with one caveat, with the one condition. After all this observation, after all these discoveries, after all this understanding of the mystery of the world, they will say, Rabbana, Subhana, Rabbana khalaqna batila, Subhanak. Oh my God, you created this beautiful world, this beautiful sky, this beautiful star, this beautiful system. I am just observing that. You are the greatest. I am just simply giving my sujood to you. This will be a Muslim scholar's response to their discovery. But in Western civilization, what will be their response? If they understand that I understood. This is my discovery. Now we will learn in a high school textbook in high schools. America discovered by, who is this Columbus man? There was a lot of people, red Indians are there. But we will, that is the Western idea of finding. But finding, they will say that Columbus discovered America. Or I understood the complex mechanism of the earth. So this is my knowledge. My knowledge I will use for my expansion, rule, power. But in Islamic age, it was for the humankind, etc., etc. This is largely about the knowledge and politics. But in this way, you see, that's why the fall of Granada in 1492, when this fall of Granada happened, that was a huge change from thinking pattern, from polity, from cultural, from epistemologically. It was largely a huge change happened in the world. From that period onwards, why I am saying that, even Islamic age period also, people were discovering the things, people were using their reason, etc., etc. But there will be a ethical boundary, or there will be a God's guidance, Allah's guidance, or after all this discovery, human will understand his humility. He will show more his humility. But in Western civilization, after the emergence of Western modernity, after all discovery, they will say that, okay, we will conquer the world. So I think, therefore I am. That is the slogan. I think, therefore I am, so I will conquer you. But because you have no knowledge. So it's deeply connected to that kind of understanding, civilizational understanding. So my stress here that in that way, nation state also kind of a new kind of phenomena after the 1492, it's emerged in 1492. So by the emergence of modernity, they want to frame all the things, all the world into that frame. They argued that this is the most developed idea of the world. For what purpose they argued that? It is not the things that, for example, even before the civilization have very great discoveries, inventions, etc., etc., etc. Even still, you are all now talking about artificial intelligence, etc. But the basis of that lie in the algebraic cultures. Algebra is developed in Baghdad, in India, in Kerala, etc., etc. But they all define it as our knowledge, our property, and our power. In that way, they see the world as a kind of the pre-modern period or pre-Western period as a kind of primitive period, backward period. They have no logic. That it's a dark age. In history books, you will hear the dark ages in the history. Who wrote this history? For example, in Islamic history, you will say this is a golden age. But in Western history, even our textbooks, high school textbook onwards, will say this is a dark age. Dark age is a middle age. In middle age, in that period, these Arabs, the barbarians ruled the world and they collapsed entire thing. That's their argument, But in reality, all these discoveries were transferred from different civilization, especially from Islamic age civilization to the West, and they actually reinterpreted in their civilizational form. What is their civilizational form? Individuality, destruction, and what you are seeing in Epstein Island, that is their civilizational, most graduate level of civilization is that. So what I am saying here, one point, nation state also emerged as a kind of, come as a kind of a modernity's package. Modernity, Western modernity, colonial modernity came with a package. Secularism, nationalism, nation state. And they very forcefully implemented this package, this trinity of the world, new trinity of the world, in entire world as a kind of progress. But we have to clearly understand that secularism and the nation state are routinely presented as universal, emancipatory achievements. But this, what we have to find out how this is not a neutral progress. And this is all product of colonial modernity. And obviously, one of the main target of this secularism, nationalism, etc., as I told you, from fall of Granada onwards, disciplining the Muslim autonomy, Muslim power, Muslim subjectivity. Why in Granada they introduced the idea of this cultural majority rule the state? For that purpose, they forcefully reconverted many people. What was the purpose? It to discipline, because Muslims, Islamic age civilization was the existing civilization. They have to disempower and they have to weaken that civilization. For that purpose, they implemented this thing. And now they created the idea of permanent majority and permanent minority as a kind of governing principle. So these concepts, the secular is neither a simple break from religion nor it's a continuation. Usually, this is Talal Asad, again, is son of Muhammad Asad, is a very popular anthropologist, especially his ideas on secularism, religion, and Islam is widely discussed and debated. So, Asad says that usually we will hear the genealogy of secularism or idea of secular and idea of secularization. These are all three different concepts. Secular and secularization and secularism. Usually we will hear that these are all started from to make a political system differentiate to those what Caesar wants to do, he has to do, what God wants to do, he has to do. So, but or it has started as a kind of different fight in between Christian sects. But what Asad says that secular is neither a simple break from religion nor it is continuation. Rather than secular is a kind of reconfiguration of Judeo-Christian civilization into a new fold. So that's why probably even Asad also give this provocative example why scarf is a problem for Europe. But nuns, Christian nuns also have a scarf. It is sensible. That scarf is sensible. Why this scarf is not sensible? The real problem is that this reconfiguration coming from this Judeo-Christian tradition. That's why they will think very differently about that. So secular state in one hand monopolize the production of legitimate law, rendering Islamic normative framework either irrelevant or subversive. Society, Muslim are constituted as a kind of internal other, probably the roots of Islamophobia, not only with the kind of some right-wing group, in deeply this secular idea always think about the Muslims are, you may be every time discussing about Muslims are not compatible with secularism, Muslims are compatible with democracy, Muslims are not compatible with, incompatible with idea of development, democracy, etc., etc. Why these talks? Because now the notion of secularism coming from this genealogical background. And the idea of religion here is epistemically reduced to private. And even Asad says that the construction of idea of religion also a kind of modern kind of idea. For example, we will never use the term religion. What we will use instead? Deen. Deen is more deeper than a religion. Probably some elements of religion there in Deen, but Deen is more than a religion. But in modern period, even Islam is a kind of a religion, Christianity is a religion. So the definition, modernity give a kind of a definition to secularism, and it's also give a kind of definition and boundary to the religion also. Modernity is secularism is not just kind of a separation of private and public, religion and secular. No, it's also kind of new. It's give a kind of a new definition to the religion or existing civilizations. And some civilizations become some civilizations become religion, some civilizations become culture, some civilization become universal ideas. So that transformation happened during this period, and sensibility, how our body should be. That's why scarf. Why scarf? Why minaret in questions? Why no beard? Muslim beard is a question. Beard, no, probably will see as a kind of a fashion or that kind of thing. But a kind of a beard with a name, Muhammad Mustafa, will have a special screening in airports. Why? Because secular is not only, it's not only about polity, society, of how something has to be sensible, it's also converted into that language. So Asad have interesting essays on the genealogy of secularism, formation of secularism, and obviously in his interesting work on suicide bombing, he's also comparing about how sacrifice, for example, sacrifice for a national cause is a kind of heroic thing. How the sacrifice, pain, suffering also redefined, reframed in the secular. So all sensibility have changed in secular time. So, and secularism also, it's not only a private and public, but secularism is also a kind of, we are told secularism does not simply regulate a religion, it produces it. That's why, a new kind of religion that is totally separated from public affairs, social affairs. It's created after the emergence of the modern national democratic secular state atmosphere. So secularism usually tell us in textbook, a neutral arbiter between competing worldviews, a guarantor of religious freedom for all, and emancipatory separation of church and state. That is usual claims. We will learn it in textbooks, and we will repeatedly hear this from politicians, etc., etc. But what Talal Asad and Sabah Mahmood is again, an anthropologist from Pakistan, she died last year. She actually studied the some of the piety movement in Egypt. Then she understood, how the subjectivity, how these women in the piety movement understand subjectivity, etc. So she said that secularism does not simply regulate religion, it produces it. Governance, not neutrally. It actively manages which religious expressions are tolerable. What kind of what is the boundary of your religious expression? That's why all these examples I put forward to you. And produce a kind of acceptable religiosity. What is the acceptable religiosity? In what extent, okay, for example, many will say that, religion is good for, in this realm, your interpersonal realm. For ethical cultivation, religion is very important. But no, for example, cultural expression, etc., etc., no, it should be regulated. Not all religion, some specific religion. And no privatization of Islam. For example, in Islam, Muslims have to, as their ethical duty, they have to follow Amrun bil Maruf and Nahy anil Munkar. How they do it within private. Or Muslim women has to perform their haya through their dress code. So how then it's their ethical kind of cultivation, ethical kind of performance, but how they will do it in public. In public it become like a security threat, security issue, etc., etc. So that's why secularism is not a kind of simple separation of private and public, but it's a kind of power. Secularism is a kind of a governing tool, a governing mechanism, a discourse of power to regulate religious subjectivities, especially Islam, Muslims, etc., etc., that coming from this national states, baggages, etc. So I already told you 1942 is the foundation of this, all these ideas coming after this 1492. Ramon Grossfugel, another important decolonial scholar, he identified 1492 as an important moment in the history, as this new trinity of the world initiated after 1492. For example, religion as understood as, which is in that time, which was the good religion debate, the white racial religious sentiments are considered as a kind of a rightful religion. All other religious practices are barbaric, insane, not no par with the civility. So that started from that. Even their definition of religion also enabled a certain kind of a proto-racism. And global hierarchy of Western East. Some kind of civilization is civilized, some are barbaric. Even history they have divided: Middle Age, Dark Age, Barbaric Age, etc., etc. But even though if you carefully look, the history probably you will read from different perspective, you will get a different kind of thing. So all this possible through the coloniality of power. Colonialism's power extended through these three trinities: secularism, nationalism, and institution called nation state. State is a kind of an institutional form. Nation is a kind of cultural majority who rules, who controls that state. So this is the important domain where we have to carefully understand. From that onwards, historically, again, this Mamdani work shows colonialism did not just divide. Not usually we will hear that they will divide and rule. No, they will define and rule. The discourse, that's why who is secular, who is not secular. What is religion, what is not religion. Who is good, who is bad. Who is barbaric, who is civilized. Who is terrorist, who is not terrorist. That's all their definition power. So they will make the categories for that purpose, and the definition through these categories, through these conceptual categories also they created, through which they will rule the world. How? Why they even still that continue? Why they will attack Iran? They will say that they have nuclear arms. They are barbaric. They will collapse entire world. Iran, why they attack? But still, who is creating destruction in the world? But their definition, the idea, power of define and rule still exists. So, and then they will say that Iran is a mullahcracy. Then what is Israel? What is America? American army general will have cross in his hand, and he will say that it's a holy war. Even George Bush said that it's a kind of a holy war, but he is secular. But Ayatollah Khamenei is, we will hear the word mullah. Even if you type in English, you will hear that this is mullahcracy. In Israel, what cracy is that? In Israel, that is democracy. Those who are in the Epstein Island, they are all progressive, Democrat, civilized, progressive people. So this definition, power of define and rule will be the, so through this definition what they have done, probably I told you in Islamic world, different community civilization engaged very freely. Even there was no compulsion to, no, you have to accept Islam or not. No, fluid communities still existed there. But no, colonialism came and they started enumeration, categorization, classifications. So these classifications created a kind of, through the colonial knowledge power, through which they created a legal kind of categories. That's why, that's the power of this secularism as a kind of a discursive power. That power rules our institution, our codes, our sensibility, our thinking pattern. So secularism, not a simple kind of an idea, it's rule our world, it's a rule our polity, it's rule our mind. It's create a kind of a different kind of second kind of God like nation state. No, your loyalty should be to the nation state as a kind of thing. So again, it's also created a political technology of minority, and as we have already discussed, a kind of a political theology or a political technology for permanent minority and majority. Then who is the political there? Actually, actual political is the survivor. We will come into that part. So this is why, you know, secularism always producing religion always as a kind of object. Islam as a kind of object, object of a kind of thing always in gaze, always in observation, always in surveillance, always in some regulation. Always you will hear that to control these people we need some law, citizenship amendment law. In Europe, migration laws, Waqf law, this law, that law. Why? To always make in a surveillance and define the boundaries, redefine the boundaries. They always want to know, careful about the exceeding of the boundary they have created. Secular boundary they have created. If somebody have exceed that, then they will again re-rule, redefine these things. So this is the idea of secular. Through this idea of secular, our political secularism also operates. So recently, many scholars, especially decolonial scholars, have criticized this idea of secular national state, etc., etc. We are seeing the calamities created by these concepts. For example, always we will hear that many people were killed because of religious conflicts. Obviously, again, the religion, the notion is coming from there. But who created and who was the reason for second two world wars? And what was the aim of the Hitler or fascist movements in Germany, etc.? They were hyper nationalist. They were, in some level, hyper modernist. Hitler wanted a state should be the systematic. There should be no Jews, no old age people, no differently abled people. So it's all based on the idea of this progress, etc., etc., etc. And they are also very strong, staunch believers of their national identity. Mussolini created under Nazi movement based on that, nationalism. Fascist movements are emerged as a kind of hyper-nationalist movements. So all these wars, calamities, have created by these concepts. So after that, many scholars, even within West, have think about what is the problem of these concepts. So they actually thought about entire delinking, epistemic delinking from this process, how we can actually reject this Eurocentric universality, the claims of Eurocentric universality, how actually we can think about a kind of modernity, novelty, progress, that if there is a possibility of thinking about modernity inseparable from coloniality. So in that level, people were thought about, and they found out that sovereignty is a key component in this. What is the idea of sovereignty? Probably you may be thought about it as a kind of political concept where people will have people will decide their own power, etc., etc. But historically, you see that pre-modern idea of sovereignty, later this legal sovereignty. Sovereign is who decide of the exception. That's the sovereign power. Later part, Foucault and all developed a kind of idea of that power now not operate through the idea of I will punish you, so you have to obey me. But how modern state is operating? Not through that. Power that modern state inculcate a notion of obeying power within you through different mechanism. Education, enumeration, health, welfare. All these schemes will create a kind of docile idea of citizenship, then power will be within you. The state power within you will control you, or that will operate autonomously. Even without a police, you will follow that rule. So that's the idea of biopower. So these ideas of power, probably it's also coming from this modern idea of all-encompassing power, the modern idea of 𝗜દ્રવિધાન. So the state, the mere holder of sovereignty, monopolize all the people within that. So that's coming from this notion of 𝗜દ્રવિધાન, state monopoly of violence. No, who was the we cannot do violence. The state will intervene, but state can do violence. So state is the holder of violence, and state, in some level, it's also regulate day-to-day, everyday dynamics of people, even social, cultural, and political realm, etc., etc. State will always know. Nowadays, it's also kind of that will control who has to die and who has to live. So all this come as a kind of power of state. Then what is the state then? State is now take the status of a godlike figure. State, a kind of godlike. State will decide who has to die, who has to live. Then state will inculcate you a kind of a fear within you. State will decide what is the ethics and ethical norms, etc. State will decide who is majority, who is minority. All these coupled notions come along with the state's ability to control the masses, etc. So probably this is some of the criticism. This criticism now you can see in many thinkers, theorists from West itself now started, probably initiated a kind of critique to this national state idea, the states monopolizing power over people, etc., etc. They developed different kind of ideas. Now I will just go to the how Islamic thinkers have seen these ideas. You can see Muhammad Iqbal, Allama Muhammad Iqbal. Iqbal's idea of Ummah is a kind of idea against the idea of nationalism. Maududi, you will very well familiar with. I will in detail we will discuss with Maududi and Sayyid Qutb idea of resistance, liberation, social justice, etc., etc. And now I will just concentrate on Maududi a little bit. We will usually think about Maududi as a kind of, he created some kind of idea. He defined, state is this, state is what. Obviously, all this characteristic of state, Maududi also identified in some level. Nationalisms, all these things are, he also identified how state is become a kind of a godlike thing. But no, he's not merely observing some kind of idea. He is actually observing a kind of praxis of national state and secularism. How this national state, how this secularism operate within Indian subcontinent and the rest of the world, how it actually disempower Muslim masses, and how it actually create a kind of a world that have no values, ethics, etc., etc. So from that point of view, he observed political dynamics very closely. You know that Maududi was earlier with the nationalist movement. He was editor of Taj, etc., etc. He was with the Congress party. He wrote a biography of Gandhi, Madana Mohan Malaviya, etc., etc. On that time, he was observing the emergence of nationalism in India, emergence of idea of secularism in India, and he identified what is the problem of this nationalism. Obviously, finally, he said that nationalism is a kind of jahiliya, etc. But key political, practical problem of nationalism, he identified nationalism is a kind of a majoritarianism. Because Maududi argued that democracy fused with the national state led to the tyranny of majority. And allowing majority control over government and deep religious differences merely exchange one fear for many. In India, democracy has made Hindu nationalism and Indian nationalism contemporaneous, leaving Muslim aspiration killed because we are in a minority. So he clearly understood this in 1920s. He clearly understood 1920, 22, 1930. He understood that nationalism is not a kind of progressive idea. It's a kind of idea of majoritarianism. So that was his practical observation. And again, he observed all the other countries where how nationalism operated. He identified nationalism is a kind of competitive racism, and its root traced back to initial germs to Aristotle. Aristotle's idea of race worship. So he identified the root there, and he elaborately discussed how Germany, US, etc., how this racial idea become a kind of nationalist idea. And he also understood state very cleverly, how state as possessing a cohesive power. The modern organic theory of the state remove all logical limits on its authority. Maududi's question was, who will, state have all authority, all power, all legitimacy, and who will control the state? That's when still everybody is asking, who will control the Trump or America, imperialism, Israel? When state want to kill some people, who will control the state? The state have that much authority, power. So if a society creates and legitimizes the state, then how can it limit the state? That was his question. Under this power, the state can dictate dress. State can dictate dress, script, Hindi, Hindu, Hindustan, script, marriage, uniform civil code, whatever. Though the life of the minority is opened up for cohesive intrusion. He identified these powerful state with the notion of this idea of nationalism as a majority will be a kind of cohesive intrusion to the life of minorities. He was very clear on that. So, he identified nationalism, national democratic state possesses an existential threat to the minorities. Means even American citizens but can vote. Even in America, African Americans, they are citizens but they cannot vote. In India, obviously Citizenship Amendment Act also going in that direction, that Guruji Goldwalker said, you can live here but you cannot participate in political affairs. But it can be made into canon for at the times of war. In the war time, these African Americans will be in forefront. Our army chief will be black, but they will lynch publicly, they will strip off from their citizenship rights. In army time, probably they will use as a canon. This Maududi wrote in 1930s. So Maududi proposed different kind of, then this is very important. Even now we understood what is the political, pragmatical way to think beyond the secular national state ideas. So Maududi argued that Islamic system is not based on national, Qaumi, or stranger, Ajnabi. The entire this national state logic is, one is national, native people. Others are Ajnabis, strangers coming from outside. But the Islamic system is based on, Maududi argued, justice, adil, and oppression. Zulm. Who is doing zulm, we will stand against that zulm, and we will stand for justice. So this is the framework he given to transcend the idea of national boundaries. Okay, so through which we can think about our polity based on this critique. Probably one of the important thing we have to think about now, I will just go to this part. Obviously, these are all not only theoretical, some kind of a theoretical discussion happening around, but now we have to think about, how we can actually, even in India, you are now facing, this Nivedita Menon is a JNU professor, she wrote recently an important work, Secularism as a misdirection. He says that why always people will say secular, it's no to just cover up with the caste, communal, and that kind of injustice or caste religious mobilization that's happening in the country. So they will know secularism is a kind of misdirection. As just like a magician will show something to do something. That's why this is a secularism is a kind of a magician's robe. So, but how we can actually, that's our challenge, SIO's challenge, how this colonial logic persists still in India, how we can actually think about that, how we can go beyond Muslim status as a kind of permanent minority, how this Hindutva intensified hierarchy, how we can actually challenge, transcend that, and how as a SIO as a movement, how we can actually navigate between negotiation and resistance to these systems of knowledge and systems of practice. So probably we can think about a decolonial or post-secular or post-national new horizon for our way forward. Salman Said, another scholar, he discussed about Islamic movements. He said that Islamism represents a possibility of non-Eurocentric world order. That post-secular, post-national imagination we have. So how we can actually think about delinking from nation-state logic, how we can think about our politics, how we can actually think about a kind of ethical counter-public means based on adil, based on standing against zulm, how we can initiate a kind of that kind of a counter-public instead of this nation-state logic, and how we can actually think about ummah-centric politics. That will that not as a kind of nostalgia, but as a kind of immediate necessary we have to construct. And how we can think about a citizenship, ethical citizenship, beyond majority and beyond ajnabi. Probably how we can, that's also Maududi also give that thing. Islamic system is not based on this idea of Qawmiya nationalism and this idea of ajnabi, but how we can think about recognized justice and zulm, how we can think about a kind of idea of belonging a community that stood for justice and stand against zulm. So these are all some of the practical area in which we can actually engage as a movement by considering all this theoretical, philosophical, critical scholarship engagement that's happening in this field. So obviously, if secularism is not mere a concept, secularism is not mere a kind of idea or theory that mobilizes. The critical idea of secularism, the critique of secularism, also not a kind of mere idea or theory or some kind of sociological concept, but it's arise from the experiences of different movements, like Islamic movements, black movements, etc., etc. We have to actually engage with that idea and move forward for a world in which everybody live with a mutual respect, mutual recognition, as existed in 1492, before 1492. But if we think about past, we have to not think about that romantic past will come back without any effort. You have to do some effort, and there will be a new world will emerge. Hopefully, we will try for that. All these critiques, all this discourse created by many scholarship is giving us a language to articulate that. If we use this language tool to analyze our contemporary things, we can go forward, move forward for a different world. Assalamu alaikum.
The qualities of the state you mentioned, like the definition of boundaries, the control of homogenization of the society, making of the minority and majority, and dictate personal law and private laws, and even to the extent of monopolization of the violence. Those are the qualities of the secular state you have mentioned. Are those qualities, right, are were ideal for the pre-modern state or the kingdom? They just don't have the technology or the capabilities to implement that. Is it the technology thing or more than that?
No, it's actually civilizational imprints, civilizational idea. That's why I just skip this slide, but and thank you for you. There is interesting work by 𝗜ጵ𝗱𝗶𝗶. Halak is a Sharia scholar. He actually wrote an interesting book, The Impossible State. His argument, one part of this book is arguing that no, and there this critique of notion of state. From Foucault to Agamben, he used that critical enterprises, and he says that state is never allow human flourishing. The idea of state, no, docile bodies. That's why even Foucault, now even we are discussing about Iran and all. When Foucault was no very critical about European state system, etc., etc. This state is creating a docile body, subjects, no, they will no, state will never allow flourishing of human soul, etc. That was his argument on entire work. In 1979, when Iran Revolution was happening, Foucault was there as a kind of reporter for some French newspaper. And he astonished the way people were engaging with the bullets, engaging with the armies. And he wrote, Islamic government is not a kind of institution. It's a political spirituality. It's a political spirituality that expresses people's will. So that's he wrote on that time, and it became a kind of huge debate in West on that time, especially in French intellectuals. It was a huge debate. Obviously, that's why Halak argues that European idea of state killing the human beings in spirit and in practice, and he says that Sharia is not only a different kind of system. It's not kind of state, a kind of cohesive power. It's a different kind of idea of authority. You have no divine authority. You will have a human authority, but that human authority have a check and balance from divine guidance. And you have ulama kind of authority, social authority. Totally different kind of authorities are there. In pre-modern governing systems, there will be different kind of authority, power structures. But in state, they are all power lies into the state. In Islamic Sharia system also, you can find out that there will be divine authority, divine check and balances, even for kings or Khalifa or Amir. And socially, there will be social authorities, ulama. Ulama will give some kind of have some kind of influence and authority over Qadi, will have some kind of authority over the people. So these kind of decentralization and dispersed kind of authority you can see in Sharia-based governing system. His final argument is that that's why a Islamic state is not possible. Probably a Islamic governance is kind of possible. So what I am here saying that so that's why obviously the civilizationally, if you think about civilizational difference, you think about, then this idea of state only possible in modern Western world order. In different societies, especially in Islamic society, they will have a different idea of govern the people, guide the people. At least your Khalifa is not a kind of a power. Khalifa is a responsibility, humility. No, Khalifa is never a kind of power. Even kings, monarchies have that kind of notion. They will, in practice they do many things, but at least in theoretically they will think that we are all That's why in knowledge also I told you, after all these discoveries, they will say, Subhanallah. No, I am the master. No, they will never say that. Subhanallah. My race is superior. No, they will say no. They will say that. Subhanallah. They will never say that I think, therefore I am. They will say that I observed, I find out by the grace of Allah. Allah know the rest of the thing. Allahu alam. Every ulama, scholars will, in their books, they will written last. Allahu alam. Because that kind of humility Islamic civilization give to the human being. But Western idea, ego, self, expansion of white racial self, that is happening now in Iran, Iraq, etc., etc. We are divine people to control the world, master the world. In Islamic idea, we are only representative of the gold. We have a responsibility if we have a power. So that's a civilizational difference, stark difference. That difference now we cannot understand because we are all normalized this modern Western idea of state, polity, etc., etc. Even our imaginations are controlled by these ideas. So probably we have to think about this difference and chalk out a kind of different idea of polity, society, and social mobilization based on this ethical idea as a kind of, even that also again, why I am using now ethical and political differentiate, it's also kind of difficulty created by the modern modern secular system. In Islam, ethic and political is closely related kind of thing. For example, Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar, it's my ethical duty. So if I protect somebody from a wool, that's also political in modern sense, but it's also, what is my gain? My gain is my Jannah. What is the societal gain? He will saved from that oppression. So in Islam, that differentiation also very difficult. That's why that these are all civilizational differences that we have to articulate that, expand that in theoretically and in practical, moreover as a movement, in practical sense, how we can think about a Islamic system, a Islamic movement based on adl against zulm, as Maududi pointed out. That will be our contribution towards a post-national, post-secular idea of society and polity. Okay, I think it's over. So, probably all of the references I have given you. Some of you are, maybe not following me since the language problem, but you can go through these works. It will help you to think about your future activities as leaders of Islamic movements. This is a crucial time for us to think beyond existing categories and existing working model, because world now wants a different kind of civilization. Across the globe you can see a resentment, a critique towards existing kind of system that creating people like Epstein or Trump or Netanyahu or in India, whatever names people want a different kind of world, where better life is possible, human flourishing is possible, mutual recognition is possible. Finally, a humility is, as a kind of core value of a human relationship. So that probably can only offer a Islamic movement in theoretical and in practical level. You have to think about that as a SIO leaders. You have to lead our country, our masses, our youth on that line. Allah probably will help us if you